Hello, everybody. It's Walter, your favorite historian, educator, professor, and social studies extraordinaire, here today to share with you several very helpful tips for new adjunct professors. As a fairly new adjunct professor myself, I wish I had someone like this to make me such a video, to give me such very prudent advice and wisdom as to how to carry out certain things when you are a new adjunct. Because I can tell you, if you are a new adjunct professor, especially one who has never conducted an in-person class before, it can be a little daunting your very first semester, and especially on that very first day. Indeed, it can be very humbling, to say the least, to stand in front of a classroom to teach a group of students whose level of interest in the subject may vary considerably. So, I have compiled a great deal of tips for you as a new adjunct to help you ease in your transition into academia, all right? And the very first one, which goes without saying, is always be on time for class. Nothing demonstrates to the students that you are a responsible individual more than you as the professor always being on time for class. Beat your students to class. Do not have them waiting on you. Now, it is certainly fine and acceptable to get there after a few of them have already arrived. I know when I was a student, I usually always beat the professor to class. And there will usually be about 2 or 3 that get to the class before the professor. But do not be that professor that keeps the students waiting 5, 10, or even 15 minutes after the class was scheduled to have started. Nothing demonstrates to the students more than that you are not exactly serious about the class, but you're not a serious individual as a whole. And even if you are totally an irresponsible and non-serious individual, which I'm sure many professors are, do not demonstrate that to the students. So always be on time for class. You are the professor. You set the tone for the class. If you are responsible, it encourages them to follow your behavior. Okay? So that's number 1. Number 2, always keep a manual record of your grades, ladies and gentlemen. Now, it goes without saying that most colleges and universities today use some sort of electronic computer-based grading system, such as Blackboard, to record student grades. All right? Some do, some do not. But regardless of whether they do or they do not, it is your responsibility to always have a manual copy of your students' grades, just in case those electronic grading systems fail. And I can tell you that they do sometimes. Guess what? You're still responsible for having these grades on hand. Therefore, always keep a manual copy of them. I prefer to use something like this, a simple pad for this to record your student grades. You can get it at Walmart, Rite Aid, anywhere. It doesn't make a difference. Keep these grades on hand, and even if you never need to use it, that's fine. All right? It's like an insurance policy. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Always keep a manual copy of your grades. Number 3, be firm but fair with your students. It is imperative as a professor, like I said earlier, that you set the tone for your class. It is important that you be firm with your students and that they respect you as the authority figure in the classroom. While you do not need to come off as Attila the Hun, it is also very important that you not come off as a cream puff that they can walk all over. You need to set the tone. You need to be authoritative. You need to set clear and concise guidelines of what your expectations are as a professor, what deadlines are, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in your class. All right? Understand, students may have certain needs and requirements. They may be coming from a long distance from one part of the campus to another to get to your class, all right? So you also be fair with them in understanding various student issues, all right? But make it clear of what you're expecting and make it clear of what your obligations are to them to provide a quality education with their cooperation, all right? That's number 3. Number 4, be understanding and responsive to student emails and inquiries. Now, a lot of professors, I can tell you from many I've had in the past, when you sent them an email, you might get a response back sometime a month later. Do not be that professor. Respond to your student emails as quickly as you possibly can. Guess what? Though a lot of professors don't care, students have lives too, and they need to be able to build their lives around your class. Therefore, it is very important for you as the professor to be able to respond to their emails so that they can get work done and do not only the work for your class, but for their other classes. You do not want to be responsible, ladies and gentlemen, for them potentially not turning in work for another class because they never heard back from you on when the deadline was for your class or when something else was, or whether they can get an extension on something. I've had it all sent to me as an adjunct, all right? So respond to student emails quickly, all right? And be sure that you understand student situations, as I said in the previous suggestion, as much as possible. A lot of students have a lot going on. You're not going to have a perfect student body. All right. Sometimes people live very far away from campus. Cars have issues. They might have something going on at home. Like I said, I've heard it all. Be understanding of your students' concerns. All right. Respond to their inquiries. Be firm and fair. All right. Number 5, get their grades back quickly and according to the university's deadlines. A lot of professors, again, don't do this. Some professors take forever to get students' grades back. Don't be that person, all right? When students submit work, find time in your schedule that you've set aside to hurry up and grade those papers, those exams, those quizzes, whatever, and get the students' grades back to them. Not only does that keep them from bugging you about their grades, but it also clears up your schedule to do other things that you need to do. Should be common sense. So when students submit assignments, one by one, grade the assignments. All right. And as professors, yes, we have lives outside of campus too. We got other stuff to do. So when you find the time to do it as quickly as possible, get the students' grades done and get them back to them so that, again, they will leave you alone and you can clear your schedule, do what you got to do. All right. Bottom line. Number 6, be aware of your school's terminology. Every school has their own terminology to state, closures and adjustments and alerts and things like that. All right. One time I got an alert that said university closed, office is open. Now, at first glance, you might wonder, what the hell does that mean? Well, turns out that means it was on a professional day or something. I don't know. That while the university's offices, admissions, records registration, library, so forth and so on, might have been open, for academic purposes, there are no classes being held. So that's an example of why you need to understand the university's terminology, because I had a class planned on that day, and it turns out, whoop-de-doo, the school was closed for classes, but everything else in the school, all the administrative offices were open. So know your school's terminology and build your schedule around that so that you don't run into those types of problems. And then you have to adjust your syllabus to teach that class on another day. Avoid that problem. Know your school's terminology. All right, number 7, be aware of the school's academic calendar and its dates. Another no-brainer. You need to know the academic calendar is telling you. You need to know what deadlines, have to be followed, are not negotiable, when to have your syllabus in, when final grades are due, when midterms are due. All right, you need to know these things because a lot of times you can get in trouble for not having submitted them on time. Know what these dates are, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Number 8, when teaching, use visuals. Students like to be talked to, but they also like to look at things while you're teaching them. I prefer to use a projector when I teach so they can read my notes as I'm talking and teaching them exactly what I'm saying from point to point to point to point. They like to look at things. So use visuals, use pictures, use whatever you have, even objects to teach your class. They will appreciate it. All right. And number 9, check out your future classroom in advance. Classrooms change from semester to semester. Technology is different. And I've had many different classrooms. Things may be completely different from the previous one. So go and check it out if you can beforehand so that you know what you're getting into. Thanks so much for listening to this video. Any questions, leave them down below. And I wish you well in your very first semester as an adjunct. Professor Shelton, out.